Hey guys, so this is gonna be, frankly, completely off the rails from what you guys are used to hearing from me, but I happen to be a bit of a history buff, and I thought I might try injecting more of my other interests into the content I produce here. That being said, I decided to start a little bit of a series, maybe, if you like it, I don't know, we'll see, talking about some more obscure history tales, focusing on war history, which I know a lot about, possibly dabbling into other topics we'll see, but for the purposes of this video, it pretty much isn't going to be gaming related at all, and I just wanted to get that out of the way up front. I will be playing a game that's somewhat related in the background though, and in this case it's World of Warships, an absolutely fantastic game that you may have seen ads for. And it really is actually a really good game, despite the overwhelming ads and the cheesiness of the whole thing. But the actual game itself is pretty solid, and I quite enjoy it. That being said, moving on to the topic at hand. I would like to craft for you, well not craft, convey, crafting implies I'm making it up, and I'm absolutely not. This is an absolute 100% true story that I swear is completely true, and no part of this is false. I did plenty of research to confirm from multiple different sources, and yo, this story is on tilt. We are going to talk about the U-505, the most unfortunate Nazi submarine of World War II. Now, before I begin, I think I want to make something clear. There's going to be nothing inherently political about this, beyond discussing the nature of the nations involved in World War II. I don't really want to push things towards any one side or viewpoint here, although I will go out on a limb and point out that Nazis are bad, which I think is obvious to most people, but not to all these days, for some reason. In any event, the other thing I want to stress though, I'm going to be discussing the crew of the U-505 as if they were, not Nazis, and I think it's important to remember that many of the servicemen fighting for Germany at the time weren't actually Nazis, nor were they even aware of what horrible acts the Nazis were committing while they were forced to fight on their behalf. So I am going to be treating these sailors as the human beings and soldiers simply doing their jobs that they were, rather than, enemy horrible Nazis that were racist and awful, because frankly, not all of them were like that. Though I am totally going to throw some shade, because this story is so ridiculous, and frankly, I couldn't make anything like it up if I tried. The U-505 was laid down in 1940 and officially launched in May of 1941. Initially, it was under the command of one Axel Olaf Lowe. However, that command would be shifted over to Captain Lieutenant Peter Zech. Zech is also quite important to most of this story, so I felt the need to bring him up a bit early. Her first patrol was the most uneventful it possibly could have been. Mainly that nothing happened. They didn't shoot anybody, they didn't get shot themselves, they just swam around for a while. So that's about as boring as you could possibly get. Her second and third patrols, however, did result in the sinking of several enemy ships, with her only taking some minor damage on the second patrol in particular. However, on her third patrol, she wound up sinking a ship that belonged to a Colombian diplomat, thus dragging Colombia into the World War II. While Colombia isn't exactly known as a military powerhouse, I would think that at this point Germany might want to keep countries from falling onto the sides of the Allies, and I'm just saying, retrospect is 2020, guys, but come on. Her fourth patrol is where things got a little bit more crazy. She was surprised in the service by a Royal Air Force patrol aircraft that dropped a 250-pound bomb right on top of her. The bomb's explosion actually caused the plane to crash, killing all on board, but the U-505 was in really bad shape. Her pressure hull was damaged and she was taking on water. Zech ordered the crew to abandon ship, but they really wanted to save the ship, so they convinced Zech to give them the time to try to save her. After 2 weeks of what I can only assume was the most slapstick repair work possible, they were actually able to keep the leaks under control, and they were able to bring U-505 back to Lorient on reduced power. This is the first of U-505's bizarre distinctions. She is considered the most heavily damaged U-boat to successfully return to port. So heavily damaged, mind you, that she spent 6 months in Lorient undergoing repairs to all the damage she suffered from a single bomb. She went out on patrol again, but was attacked by British destroyers and had to come back, this time being sent to France for repairs. Now, this is relevant because the next 4 patrols just didn't happen for the U-505. They did go out, but they were only out there for a few days before they had to turn around due to an equipment failure. This is because the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, decided it was a really great idea to have French dock workers, some of them secretly working for the French resistance, work on their U-boats. And, you know, I don't know if it needed to be said that perhaps forcing the recently conquered countrymen, you know, of the place you're occupying to work on your secret and well-designed machines, giving them ample time to, I don't know, break something, might not be the best decision, but what do I know? In any event, Zetch actually took a lot of flack for this, which is odd because it clearly was not his fault. This was during a time when a lot of U-boats were being sunk due to Allied attacks, and many of the commanders would joke and say that there is only one commander who will always come back, Zetch. Which, wow, that's an epic burn, you guys. He has to come back due to equipment failure that is in no way his responsibility or his fault, and he's not out there dying horribly entombed thousands of feet under the water. Man, way to really, really throw some shade. Morale was suffering aboard the U-505 due to all this nonsense. However, by her 10th patrol, she was finally able to get out there with nothing breaking. This was October 1943, and British destroyers spotted her east of the Azores. She submerged to avoid detection, but she had to deal with a severe depth charge attack at this point. Now, it's important for me to clarify that there are many things in life that are more suited to certain situations. You don't want to do certain things at certain times because they'd be considered, shall we say, inappropriate. I'm sure you can imagine times where you wouldn't, say, stand on your head. Maybe not do that at a wedding or a funeral, for example. Stupid example, but I bring this up because one of the things that it's generally inappropriate to do at almost any time is commit suicide. It is also particularly inappropriate to do that when you are the commander of a U-boat and you have an entire crew of scared and panicked sailors depending on you to give them orders to survive a depth charge assault. Zetch, perhaps realizing he was fighting for the historical bad guys, or succumbing to post-traumatic stress disorder, or just reacting badly to all the insults he had suffered, or because depth charges are scary, decided now was as good a time as any to stand up in front of his crew and shoot himself in the head. Fortunately, the first officer on duty, Paul Mayer, took command immediately and was able to ride out the depth charge attack, despite the incredibly insane situation he suddenly found himself in. The Kriegsmarine, who analyzed the incident, opted to, instead of rewarding Mayer for his incredible bravery and ability to keep his cool under pressure, to merely absolve him of all blame. That is a direct quote. Except they probably wrote it in German. But in any event, wow, you know, and guys, I just feel like Mayer probably knew that none of that was his fault. But thanks for clarifying. On a related note, Zetch is recorded as the only submariner during that particular war to commit suicide in response to stress, which is not a great distinction, nor is it one the U-505 needed on her already incredibly awkward record, shall we say. Zetch was replaced by a guy by the name of Harold Lang, and while her 11th patrol did not last long, she only returned early because she rescued 33 crew members from a German torpedo boat. Now, I'm going to shift sides here for this next part because I want to explain what was going on with the Allies at this point. German U-boats had been a massive problem for the Allies for a lot of reasons. The U-boats specifically focused on destroying merchant ships and cargo ships. They didn't generally engage military-style ships. The idea was to starve the Allies of supplies, and while that worked early, it got a little bit less effective as the war dragged on. Either way, the Allies were pretty sick of all this U-boat nonsense it had to deal with this entire time, and the United States Navy established a task force specifically to hunt down and destroy U-boats. Captain Daniel V. Gallery was in command of this, and under his command was the escort carrier Guadalcanal, as well as several destroyer escorts, the Pillsbury, the Pope, Flaherty, Chatelain, and Jenks. Those are great names, by the way. I love this. The U-505 was off the coast of Rio de Oro, near Africa, when she was detected under the Chatelain's starboard bow, at only 800 yards, which was really close. The other escorts moved towards the contact, and several aircraft were launched from the Guadalcanal to get a bird's-eye view of the situation. Being so close, the Chatelain actually couldn't use depth charges because they couldn't sink fast enough, so instead she fired what were called hedgehog mortars that were designed for more close-range attack. Following that, she did an about-face in order to try to attack with depth charges. The 505 was sighted by one of the aircraft, which shot into the water to mark the spot, and the Chatland used her depth charges. Right after detonation, a large oil slick was spotted. The sub was forced to surface. Now that the submarine was a sitting duck, the entire task force immediately opened fire. At this point, Lang was pretty sure the 505 was done for and ordered his crew to abandon ship. They obeyed this order, but kinda did a half-baked job at scuttling the boat. See, back then it was pretty normal to scuttle boats to avoid their capture, but the crew only opened some of the scuttling valves, not enough of them to actually sink the boat, and they got out of there so fast they even left the engines running, which was also not normal. This left the ship in an odd situation. Its rudder had been damaged, so it was locked in a turning fashion, and it circled clockwise. Initially, the Chatland thought the submarine was gearing up for an attack, so they fired a torpedo, which missed. After the survivors were collected, an 8-man party led by Lieutenant Albert David decided to enter through the conning tower of the submarine. They found the sub completely deserted, and they secured the charts and the code books, which were the most valuable items they possibly could have gotten out of the situation. They also decided to close the scuttling valves and disarm demolition charges. Oh, yeah, they also stopped the engines too, because frankly the spinning was getting obnoxious by that point. Now by this time, the task force had a few options. Technically speaking, their mission was to destroy all U-boats, but they had a rare opportunity here. Captain Gallery opted to instead try to capture the submarine for study. They tried to tow it with the Pillsbury, but that boat decided it was a really good idea to ram into the submarine instead, causing flooding in 3 compartments. So that was good. Instead, they sent another boarding party over and tied a tow line to the Guadalcanal. They also had one Chief Engineer Commander Earl Torsino do some makeshift repairs and get the propellers to windmill as they passed through the water, which charged up the submarine's batteries, allowing its water pumps to activate and getting out the rest of the water so she floated normally. The Enigma codes they got from the ship were insanely valuable, and Albert David received a Medal of Honor for leading the boarding party. Oddly, Admiral Ernest King considered court-martialing Captain Gallery because he towed the U-505 instead of sinking it. This was never done because, frankly, Ernest, did you not have anything better to do, man? Come on, we're in a war right now. You don't need to be this petty. As for the crew, they were isolated from most other prisoners. This was because they considered it a big deal to try to keep the capture of the 505 a top secret. They didn't want the Germans to know they'd gotten a hold of this thing. As for the ship itself, it was kept on a Navy base in Bermuda for a while. She was also redesignated to USS Nemo to try to keep up appearances when it comes to, them not knowing they captured this thing. She actually went on tour along the East Coast to encourage the sale of war bonds, but after the end of the war, they didn't really have a use for her. The Navy was actually planning on using her for target practice until she sank, but Gallery, who by this point was a rear admiral, told his brother John Gallery about it, and Father John contacted the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. He wanted to see if they were actually interested in the 505 due to its historical significance. And as it turned out, the museum was very interested in the U-505. After negotiating with the Navy, the government opted to donate the submarine to the museum in 1954, where the U-505 has been on display ever since. It actually went over a bit of a redo this past year, trying to restore her to more of her original condition. It's a pretty incredible exhibit, and it also gives the U-505 one of its only other distinctions, it being one of the few examples of a submarine of her class still around. And I suppose it's a worthy end for a ship that really had no luck its entire existence. It had a poor war record, and things went absolutely south for it more times than anyone cared to count. But hey, now she's a permanent piece of history. And frankly, after all she went through, I think she kinda deserves it. Plus, it's not like the boat was a Nazi. It's not its fault. Got political. Sorry. But no, seriously, Nazis are terrible. Why would you even question that? So, I hope you've enjoyed this video that, frankly, is not at all like a thing I've done so far. But perhaps you found this story interesting. If you do, feel free to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if there's any other piece of history you'd like me to share or talk about, or if you just want me to do more regular videos like this. I'd be really happy to talk about stuff like this because it gets me really interested, and I like discussing history of this nature. I have a few other ideas for videos, and if you want to see more, absolutely let me know. I won't know if you like the video if you don't tell me. It's just one of those things. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Till next time. This is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.